It's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parshat Va'era, 2 Moshes. If we look at the beginning of Parshat Va'era, we say, hey, wait a minute, this is a rerun all over again. I mean, God appears to Moshe, he already appeared to him in the burning bush. He tells him his name, they already talked about his name. He says he's taking him to Israel. He already told him they're going to Israel. Then, we have another problem. We've already met Moshe. We know he had a father and a mother and sister, and we found out he had a brother. And now we have a new genealogy. We also knew about his wife, children, at least one child. And now we have a whole genealogy here. There's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and Moshe and Aaron, they fit into this Levi family. What's that doing over here? Why now? We should have that at the beginning or have it at the end. But why in the middle? As he's about to go to Paro, he said, wait, you have to tell the family genealogy. Who cares about family genealogy? What's it doing there? And right before it and after it, we seem to repeat the same thing we had at the burning bush. I can't do it. I'm not a good speaker. I can't do it. You'll do it anyway. Be quiet. I'll be with you. Don't worry about it. So many commentators and even critics of the Bible have said, this makes no sense. This seems like a rerun, repetition. What's going on? So I'd like to suggest the following. Why was Moshe chosen? Well, if we look in last week's Parsha, on Parshat Shemot, Moshe was chosen because 3 stories tell us why Moshe was chosen. He smote the Egyptian. He was passionate about those who oppressed the Jews. Number 2, he was a good leader. He tried to get the Jews to stop fighting, to be united like a good leader. Number 3, even if other people had nothing to do with his family, were being unjust and stealing the water from the girls and chasing them away, he stood up for the women, for the oppressed, for those who were being cheated. He was a man of great passion. And he finds this wonderful man, Jethro, and he has a nice relationship with this man, Jethro, and no doubt they discuss great things, as they eventually will explicitly in Parshat Yitro. They talk about the greatness of God and everything else. He's a friend of the great philosopher and the great seeker of religions, Yitro. So that's why he was chosen. That's what it seems. But over here, he says, who's Moshe? Moshe is from the tribes of Israel. There's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. He's from Levi. He's got this great brother, Aaron. Aaron married Elisheva bat Aminadav, and she's the sister of Nachshon. Nachshon's one of the great leaders from Judah. We don't discuss Judah, but we mention Nachshon. And we mention that Elazar, his son, is very great, and he had a child as well, Pinchas. We mentioned, so who is Moshe? This is who he is. Who Aaron and Moshe? This is Moshe and Aaron from this family tree. So why don't you tell me that from the beginning? I thought it was great because there was a man who was a Levite, married a daughter who was a Levite, and they had children, and then he was hidden and for 3 months, and then he was put in the river, and his sister saved him. I thought that was the foundation story. Now you tell me, no, it's the family tree. So I'd like to suggest is that what we have here is the question of what gives Moshe the chutzpah, the gumption, the inner guts to stand up against Paro and transmit the word of God, or to be the leader of the Jewish people, that God would choose him. Where does it come from? It comes from 2 places. We mentioned the idea of the great Moses, the great seeker of justice. That's last week's Parsha. That's Shmos, Parshat Shmos. In Va'era, the context is he comes from a holy family, the tribes of Israel. Yes, Reuven and Shimon have done bad things, but the way the rabbis like to look at it, they're all shiftei kod, they're the tribes of Israel. And it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it comes from these tribes. And the Ramban says that these are people who are great tzaddikim. They must be very special people. Aminadav, Putiel, Elisheva, these must be important people. They're mentioning them. They must be holy people. Their Barbanel says, Kulam Yirei Hashem, Me Avram ad Amram. They're all great fearers of God, people who fear God. Going back to Abraham, it doesn't quite mention Abraham, but it implies that the children of the Reuven is a child of Israel, and Israel is a child of Yitzchak, Yaakov. Good. So going back to Abraham, all the way down to Amram, Moshe's father, they're all tzaddikim. Levi, Gahat, Amram, Yocheved, Moshe, they're all holy people. The context is, you know why Moshe is chosen? Because he comes from this holy family. Somehow the Levites transformed from being this nudnik tribe that Jacob had a lot of problems with, to being this chosen tribe, the Bechir Israel. They're the chosen ones, the ones who really went with God, who would not worship the golden calf, who were the princes in Egypt. The rabbis say that Amram was in charge in Egypt, he was in charge, and Aaron was in charge. In Egypt, there were people in charge, they were the leaders. These were the righteous people. Aaron is such a beloved person. His brother was chosen, his younger brother was chosen, and God attests to us that Aaron is happy in his heart for his brother. That's the kind of person he is. That's why Moshe is chosen, because he has an incredible family. You say, incredible family? I'll tell you his family. He's married to Tzipporah. I don't know if she's Jewish or anything. I don't know if she's a Midianite. He's got 2 sons. Eventually, at this point, he has 1 son. Maybe he'll have another son. Maybe he has 2 sons. The Gershon and Eliezer, he barely gave a bris to Gershon. We never really hear about him. And in this story, they don't mention Moshe's children. They don't even mention his wife. They mention Aaron's grandchildren, but they don't mention Moshe's children. From this perspective, Moshe is not married to Zipporah. Maybe he's divorced. From this perspective, Moshe is part of the Aaron family. That's his family. As Rashi says, well, Aaron's children are like his children. He taught them, so they're kind of his children. So it really does tell us Moshe's children, and that's the children of Aaron. They're his students. Whenever he learned something from God, he always told them first. So we have then 2 Moses, 2 Moshes. One Moses is the Moses of passion, the Moses who won't tolerate injustice and the smiting of a Jew, the Moses who won't tolerate Jews fighting, the Moses who won't tolerate the injustice of against the girls. And then you have the Moses who's a Jew, who's part of the holy tribe and family of Levi, even if he wasn't exactly raised by Levi, maybe only to a certain extent when he was weaned, but that's his family, and those are his people, and it's from that perspective that he comes to lead the Jewish people. Where does he get his gumption from? Both from his inner character that he created, and from the family that he's from, that puts an imprint on his DNA, both spiritually and physically. This Medrash in Koheles has become very popular, that there are 3 names you have. The name that your parents give you, the name you acquire for yourself, and the name that others give you. Well, the name that he sort of made for himself was in Parshat Shemot, what he did to show that he really cared about people. And in this Parsha, that's the name that his parents gave him, the family that his parents gave him, the DNA, spiritually, ethically, and otherwise, that he was bequeathed by being part of this holy, holy family. Think about, what gives us status. Rabbi Soloveitchik spoke about this, that when a person is mourning, they take off their shoes. During the Shiva, you're supposed to take off your shoes. Why? He says shoes are status. People of very lowly status, farmers, peasants, they don't have shoes. Fancy people have shoes. People are part of society, they have shoes. If you want to be a hippie, what do the hippies do? They walk without shoes. Why? They don't want to be part of society. On a fast day, there's a question, can you really say that God has given us a status? God has given us everything. You're not wearing your shoes, maybe you shouldn't say it. The Rabbi Soloveitchik says that every morning we say a bracha over our shoes. Why? Because we want to thank God for our status. But status comes in different ways. People think status is, money is status, position is status. No, Moshe's status comes from his goodness, his passion for justice. Moshe's status comes from his family. That's a good kind of status. That's a status we want to be thankful for. Every morning we say, Sha'asa li kol tzarki, that God has given us a holy status. Status comes from good and solid things. Every time we stand to pray before God, what gives us a right to stand before God? Well, partially I say, look, I'm trying to do the best. I'm trying to stand before God. I confess my sins. I pray to you, God, that you accept me in front of you for whatever I've done. And we say, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak. We say we are children of our forefathers. Our gumption, our chutzpah, our self-worth comes from our parents as well as from ourselves. Rav Tamir Ganot, one of the great teachers in Israel, recently lost his son tragically to fighting in Israel. He said, I'll tell you the difference between last week and this week. Last week we said, oh, I'm going to get you out of Egypt. Oh, you got to get out of there. I'm going to take you out of Egypt. I'm going to save you. But this week we say, not only that we're going to Israel, but what's the purpose? What's the mission? What's the plan? What's the vision for the Jews? That we find out in this parsha. In that sense, the parshiyot are flipped. The family, he learns here about his vision, and then he learns about his past, about the past of Moshe that made him Moshe. And last week, we learned about his vision for the future, Moshe's passion for things coming into the future. That was last week's parsha. Is Moshe the activist, or is Moshe sort of the part of the nation of Israel? Is he a person who's moved by the humanist element, that he just can't take the suffering of his people? Or is he moved by Vayitzei Lachav, the fact that these are his brethren, the fact that this is his family tree? These are the two elements of Moshe. Moshe was passionate about justice. Moshe the activist, that's last week. And this week, Moshe the Jew. Moshe is part of the Jewish family. You know, he grew up elsewhere, but he knows ultimately, Vayitzei Lachav, even last week, he went out to his brethren. He knows his brethren. That's who he is. We have two Moshes, one in last week's parsha, one in this week's parsha. Each one of us has their own characteristics which make them who they are, and we have our families. Together, we integrate in one personality of who we are. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. He had these two elements, and through these two elements, both family and personal achievement, he became the Moses we know and love, the Moses who is Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our prized teacher. Thank you for joining us here at the Baron Hirsch Congregation for our discussion. Parsha, join us each week for a discussion of the holidays. Thanks to our sponsors, Joe and Jennifer Roberts, and thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, who's recently engaged, Mazel Tov, him, and Elise, Mazel Tov.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.